Guys, it's Monfort here from Decision Inc. and I'm doing this recording to make up for the fact that I wasn't able to do the New South Wales Small Business Month event that I promised I would host on Monday. So I apologise for that for anyone that was willing to tune in. But for those that haven't heard of this, what we're going to be doing is talking about how data analytics can help initially with small businesses, but I feel like this is something that can help businesses of any size, and whether you're already quite sophisticated, I think you can get something out of this, or whether you're just getting started, I think you can get something out of this as well. So as I said, I represent Decision Inc. and we are data and technology experts with a global mandate. We've got offices in Sydney and around Australia, as well as South Africa, and also in the UK. So I'm just going to jump straight into the presentation here. So I'm going to share my screen, and here we go. Alrighty, so first of all, there's going to be a bit of a presentation, so let's just jump into that. And this is all about harnessing the power of data. And I think it's really key for businesses because rather than just relying on your gut, you actually want to see what's going on behind the scenes, see what kind of data is there in terms of what we generate all the time. I think without data, we're just guessing when we make a decision. But if we have access, as I say here, to the results of things like whether it's transactions or it's accounting details or whether it's client information, it really helps you to make much more informed decision making. And there is, an argument, I guess, a conversation going on in the out in the public, whether it's, is it more is it better to go by gut, or is it better to just be purely data driven? I think it's a bit of both. I think with gut instinct and experience comes some interesting insights that you can provide that maybe isn't in the data. But if you have access to the data, and even better, if you have ways that you can do something with that data, then it's going to make life a hell of a lot easier, and you're going to be able to do some really interesting things versus competitors. And I guess the key reason for all of this is that we are awash with data. Whether you are big or small, you are creating data. Your clients are creating data. The stuff that you are doing in terms of transactions is creating data all the time. And what's interesting is that companies that are maybe small or medium size, you might be using just say accounting systems like Xero, MYOB, QuickBooks, etc. to manage your accounts, or you might have Shopify to manage online orders. And if you do have all of these types of applications that help make your life easier, there's a whole lot of information that's coming out of those. So data is going to keep growing. We know that. We are building petabytes, and it's not just terabytes anymore, it's petabytes of information that is out there in online and in terms of what companies are creating. And especially as we add more services, the more this is going to grow. So harnessing is going to be important, and it is everywhere. It's structured and unstructured. So structured are things like tables and columns and tables and rows of information, and unstructured are things like images, or where you might have a PDF that has information that could be taken and scraped from that. And whether it is transactions that you're doing, like I said, or it's in your accounts, there's a lot of information out there. And even just getting started with that, and we'll show you what we can do, but even just getting started with that is going to be important. And how do some businesses currently handle and do these sorts of things with data? Well, most businesses that I know are doing only things with Excel. And there's pros and cons to doing this, but we'll run through a few of those. So it's really easy to access, especially if you've got a Microsoft subscription. It's quick and easy to use if you know how to create and do some, mini analysis. And they've definitely got some decent graphs, charts, and tables. I've worked on quite a few projects where it was much easier to just do it in Excel. And we were able to do that because the type of data we were using wasn't that much. It was easy to handle, and it didn't take too long. But that's kind of where it ends. The cons main one being that Excel is not a database. So it's not really something that is going to scale, especially as you start growing your business, getting larger, and you need to do analysis more quickly. You need a database for that kind of thing, and Excel is not that. it's not easy to link Excel to other applications as well. So that's something to be mindful of. Whereas if you have other you might have a business intelligence application, for example, and we'll go through that. And those are easy to bring into other work that you're doing. It can be very, very time consuming to build or change a model. And I know many people that have built charts in Excel, and when you have to go tweak those, it's very fiddly and finicky to be able to do anything there. And because it is so manual, it is prone to errors. So it's something where, you might have a sheet that you saved, or you might get an unfortunate timed Windows update and you've still got things open and it closes, you have work deleted, you have errors from manual handling. So prone to errors and easily lost, that's another two things. And there's many more when you Google these things. Excel's great, it's a good way to get started, but we need to go beyond that. And that's the key with all of this. And if we take a look at where companies are as they progress their analytics capabilities, there's things that we can do moving from the present and looking at things that were in the past, and how do we move towards like the future. So reporting on the results of the action and creating awareness and a decision about what must be made. That's all around what we would call descriptive, including understanding and scoping the context of the past decisions that have been made. So looking at all of that, that's the evolution of analytics where we talk about what is descriptive. And that's pretty basic. It's stuff that you're probably already doing with Excel. Taking it further, if we just focus on creating that awareness around a decision and also understanding the scope and context, that's more diagnostic, that's leveling up a little bit. We take it further. If we identify likely outcomes, we get into predictive. And then finally, as we identify and talk about and even show that in the applications that we build, we can see the next course of action. So analytics isn't just about making pretty charts. It should also be about making recommendations and getting to that prescriptive area so we can take action. And then if we look at the progression of digitization across how easy it is and the types of profit margins that you can get, things that are difficult and low in terms of ease of digitization and profit margin, and things like commodities, move into physical goods and then services and then experience and into software content. So digital transformation will allow us to, will allow these experiences to be, easily sold. You can move into different areas, especially if you're doing something with your data. So if you're a company that is collecting a lot of information about clients, taking that information from the transactions that you were selling, whether it was physical goods or services, etc., turning that into some insights that you can use to make your life easier in terms of making decisions, but also something that you can give back to clients, that's going to be really powerful in terms of how you can take those next steps and perhaps find other ways to sell new things to clients and find what they need, or even to provide services to make yourself more sticky in terms of what it is that you can do for those clients as you grow your business. So it's important. And at Decision Inc., we do a lot of different work across different service lines. We've got a slide like this that covers different industries. So whether it is FMCG and retail, or it's manufacturing, or it's finance, or it's government, we do a lot of work in all those different areas. But for the majority of people that I speak to that are in the small to medium-sized businesses, they are doing work and services and selling goods mainly within the FMCG and retail space. So you can see some of the things here. Like I said, the slides will be made available after all this. There's going to be some links in this as well, so you can read this at your own discretion. But as you can see, we do things like demand planning around like financial planning and stock optimization. So we've done that kind of work globally. We've done a lot of stuff with e-commerce and loyalty, when, even vision analytics that we've done with clients. So customer analytics as well, customer 360, looking at the whole kind of view of a customer and giving that to you, and even creating stuff that is meant for the customer so they can even see what it is that's you have in terms of information on them and how that can help make their purchasing decisions easier. And so when we look at customer intelligence, and this is probably really important, because if you're selling to them, it's really a good way to understand what's in their mindset, where is the data that's being created in that space, and how can we actually do some stuff with it. So whether it is at that point of sale, whether you have loyalty programs, you're tracking them on social media and you can see their interactions with you, or maybe you have in-store beacons and checking further things like foot traffic and online behavior and behavior across other stores that you might have. All of this creates information, and there's so much that you can do in terms of using that information to make it easier to make decisions, but also to give value back to clients as well. So what's the next big challenge? The next big challenge becomes, what do you do with this data? And that's the point of this this presentation. Like, how do we harness that information? How do we create value and create better experiences? All up, it's a better outcome, not just for the customer, it's a better outcome for you as a business, because you're doing things that are evolving the conversation. And it's just going to be a better outcome overall, because as more businesses do this, we change the behavior of how people interact with data, and it's really not that hard. So to that point, does this cost a lot of money to get started? A lot of people think that to build an app or to build some sort of experience is going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is not the case. You can get started at a small scale. You can get started at a medium scale. You can get started and you can pay a lot of money to get started. That's fine, but it really depends on what you're doing. The key thing with all of this is that you need to talk to experts. You need to do some research yourself, and using all of this, combining all of the information that is out there that I'll share with you right now, not all the information, but at least some of it to get you on a good start. Combining all of that should give you a better idea and realize that, doing this kind of stuff does not have to cost a lot. So I would, if I were you guys, first of all, it's great that you are listening in. I'd ask people that to get started. I know of a couple of businesses where the analytics and the dashboards that have been created for them to monitor their business was actually created by family members. It was by friends. It was by people that they knew. So if you are nervous about getting started and reaching out to bigger businesses and consultancies, talk to your family and friends. Talk to other people where you've seen this kind of stuff. If you're on LinkedIn, reach out to some of those businesses where you've seen them doing something interesting like this. It doesn't have to be your competitors. It could be someone in a similar space, but in another industry. That could be useful. There's also an important point to note here about researching yourself. It is going to cost you not necessarily money, but time. And I know time is money, but if you're willing to see what you can do to further take your business into the world of data and doing more stuff with data, then I think it's well worth the time. I don't know what your hours are. I'm sure you work long hours, but whether you've got time on the weekend, wherever it is that you've got time, maybe it's even just listening to podcasts on your way to work and from work, or on the treadmill, or as you're doing a walk, wherever you are, there are little life hacks that you can do, and there's videos you can watch and podcasts you can listen to if you don't want to read and take that time there. There are things that you can do. There's a lot of low-cost options to getting started, especially with your learning. There is the concept of open source and off the shelf. If that's a foreign kind of term, open source, consider that as being free. And off the shelf is more stuff that's it's paid for. So there are some applications where they're considered open source. What that means is that whilst they are free to access, they might have limitations. They might be more complicated. And I'll show you what some of those things are. Off the shelf, it might be more costly to get started. And even though it is costly, some of these things, they do let you trial it for free, or even use some of what is capable of doing in that software for free until you need to add more users. But off the shelf typically means that it's something that is more cost added to it, but it's easier to use. And we'll show you that. There's many tools out there. A big one here, number 4, is that Google is your friend. So when you're like, I don't know where to get started, or what can I do, or how do I solve this? Google it. I've got Shopify. How do I get data out of that? Google it. I know a lot of these applications, they've all got their own kind of reporting within them. That's great. But what if you need to get the reporting out of Shopify, combine it with something that you've got from Xero or some other accounting system, and you want to add weather data to that from the Bureau of Meteorology, or some ABS statistics? Combining all that information You're not necessarily going to be able to do that just within the single app that you've got there. But there are things like the Xero App Store, where there's a lot of other plugins that you can add to that. MYOB, that they've all got something, you know, that you can do there with the data, but taking it beyond that, that's something interesting. We'll look at something called Atani, which is a software that I've used in a previous role, and it was really good at doing some of those connections. And the next one is great. We are going to look at some examples here. So I've got a few. There's many different places that you can get data from. But when I was at in previous roles and even in this one, I'm back at Decision Inc. after being away for a couple of years. I learned how to do all this analytics work through them. It really helped me when I was like an analyst working at CBA many moons ago. But being able to do stuff with data that I was able to learn was really helpful for me in my career in terms of being able to answer questions. And I think taking that same approach in terms of how you can do stuff for your own business, from people that have small businesses or medium businesses that talk to me, they want to be able to do stuff with their data, and being able to do all of that with software that can automate some of that process, that can make it easy to visualize the information and make charts. That is something that I learned a long time ago, and I'm hoping that, you know, you guys can go on this path as well. So all of these links here, these will be interactive. You click on the link, it's going to take you to the app, but I'll take this moment to pause and jump to the actual applications. So I've got a whole heap of tabs open here, which have different applications. And so I'll run through these, but this is using one of the applications that are useful that you could take a look at. So there's three types that I want to show and talk about here today. There's ClickSense is what it's called, and I'll show you all the links for that one. There's Tableau, which is another popular tool, and there's also Power BI. These tools fall into what's called the off-the-shelf area. So here's Power BI. You can go to that page. There'll be a link in the show notes, obviously. There's Click, and you can also go to Tableau as well. You can go to their site and see this information. These interactive applications I built here, they are using Power BI, okay? And it's all interactive. You've got some filters down the side. These are just examples of what could be done with the information that you have. So it's all interactive. So what this is showing here, there's 4 key menus. There's payroll, jobs index details. There's employee wage index details. This was a bit of information that was created by the ABS. They shared that out as Excel files, and what we did was just basically connect to that information using Power BI. And I was able to build this interactive dashboard. And what it allows us to do, if we look at payroll jobs, we can see that indexes here where, for example, if it's a really low number compared to 100, so 100 is the baseline, but something like this, accommodation and food services, it's 85, because on average of the weeks leading up to when COVID hit in March, and also beyond that, it had the biggest drop. So 85 is basically a 15% drop from 100 on average over these next couple of weeks as to where the payroll jobs were, so the number of jobs that were there. So in that industry, and if we take a look at wages, it was mining that had the biggest drop in wages, and we can see how this is all interactive. So I can click on mining, I can look at mining just for New South Wales, and it's been a bit up and down. In fact, they actually had an increase in wages immediately after the lockdowns, but then it decreased steadily from there. So how does that look versus the ACT? So what we can do is we can click on the ACT. Oops, I lost mining, so I'll have to hold down Control and click on that. But we can see how it evolved up to when lockdown started, mostly across the whole country. They use March 14 as the start date there. And we can see how that's dropped. So you can do all that kind of stuff there. We can even look by age groups if we wanted to. So if I just reset that here. So 20 to 29 age group, how they were affected, how the 30 to 39-year-olds were affected. We can even look at that across like a specific industry. So information and media, we can see how that evolved just for that particular age group. And we can do it by sex, gender or state or territory, etc. So that's one of the applications there and what you can do with Bureau of Statistics data. Another one was looking at labor force statistics. So all of these different views that you have, these are things that you can just design in PowerPoint, another Microsoft tool, and then you can apply as a background to Power BI. And that's what I've done here so that I can have these menus where I'm looking at the unemployment rate across different states. We can look at what the employment rate, the number of employed persons was full time. We can even zoom into a particular period. We can see the big drop off there in most states, biggest being New South Wales, a dip in Victoria, big dip in Queensland. Obviously, it's all relative to them. What some people might notice here is that in this case, we've chosen to not have all of the states as having their own axes. In terms of good chart design, you would probably want to put these as all the similar axes, but especially for the smaller states, you're not going to see the nuance in terms of the dip. So I've kept it as is there. So, it's just something that you've got a choice as to what to do there, but we can move from that to the single chart if we wanted to, focusing on New South Wales, or just look at Queensland and SA and all the other kind of states that are there. So that's another one. Another example is retail sales. So these are 3 examples from the ABS in terms of data that you can play around with. Another feature from Power BI is the hover feature. So I can hover over some of these bar charts, because what's interesting is that with bar charts, when you hover, when you have a bar chart, it tells you at a point in time what is going on, but it doesn't tell you how that trended historically. And that's why we've got the bar hover, so that when I hover over that, I can actually see how things might have changed over time, okay? So we can even do that. We can look at a historical trend. So I've got the seasonally adjusted value that just comes from the ABS here. I've turned that into a year-on-year value. I can look at just say clothing and retail. So imagine all of this information is your information. Imagine this is something that you've got on your customers, and maybe you've combined some free information from the ABS or other places. These are things that you can do with Power BI, okay? You can even build something like I've done here for ETFs. So ETFs are exchange traded funds. So I get the information from the ASX. I've built this website here. It's got details on what can be done with the app. I've got some, bits of information here. I've even got the app itself. Again, this is something that was built with Power BI. It is not mobile friendly. Okay, so just letting you know there, it is free to access. It's not mobile friendly because I'm using the free version of Power BI to be able to share this information with the wider public. I'm a bit of an aficionado, can't even say the word, in finance, having worked in that industry for the last 6 years before coming back to Decision Inc. And I just find this kind of information fascinating. It sits in a bunch of Excel tables, so taking it out and making it available is something that I thought was really interesting, and it helps with the education that people have and understanding about the market. So I've got a couple of menus here. So you've seen different ways that Power BI can be designed. I mean, these two are similar, that's great. Here's a different kind of design and a completely different design as well. I've got different sections that people can look into here. And there's even ways that you can tell data stories. So in this example here, I've made it so that people can just click on the key headers. There's a bit of text explanation there. So imagine that you've got some data you want to share with clients, but they don't necessarily want to have all of the different filters to play around with the data. They just want some insights. They want you to give them the insights. So you can even do something where there's some level of interactivity. So I can click on some of these things to see some interactivity, or you could just have it so that as they click through, they get a bit of text and they get a bit of insight about the story that you're trying to tell them with just limited interactivity there. So it's worth looking at. And these are the types of things that you can do with all of these different products: Tableau, ClickSense, Power BI, others. Okay, so I've gone through here how you can, and these links will be available, so you can take a look at that. So if we go back to the presentation. So one of the things that I thought would be interesting was to take a look at Atani, because they're a Aussie-based company that is doing some interesting things within the Power BI space, but more importantly, they are linking to very common software that's being used by small and medium-sized organizations. So many small businesses need some sort of accounting software. They're probably on Xero or MYOB or QuickBooks, or maybe even Sage. Atani has a business model where it enables you to connect to those systems. It pre-builds a whole heap of Power BI applications, just like you've seen there before. And from that, you can then tweak it and change the way that it looks, or you could, maybe you're happy with the information that's there that comes directly out of Atani. So Cameron Lynch, he's a really good guy. I have done some work with him in previous roles, and he's got some really interesting kind of things that he's doing there in terms of connecting to those and many more systems, and there's more on his website as well. So I'll have that link for Atani in the show notes as well, and when I share this these sets of slides. And data analytics tools. So as I mentioned, there's 3 key tools that I've really played with. There's many more. There's an interesting one in ThoughtSpot as well. Those are what we would call off the shelf. There's also these open source tools. So if you want to do some stuff that gets into and delves into the world of data science, I think it's worth looking at Python. Anaconda is a really good way of using Python. There are different deployments of Python that you can have, but Anaconda is a way that it gives you a really nice user interface for you to play around with and learn Python. There's so many different ways that you can do that. And then there's also R. And R is another piece of data science software. It's favored by many industries that like to play with the statistics and the numbers there. So these are really interesting tools. They are open source, so i.e. free. Some of these ones here, they might have a cost that is required as soon as you need to level up and start sharing things with others. But if you're just using it for yourself, most of these ones will have some sort of free version there. And so if we just go back to the websites here, so looking at Anaconda, so Anaconda is a way that if you go to that and download that, follow the instructions, it is just a way for you to actually play around with Python. RStudio is what I would recommend if you're going to do some stuff with R as well. And I have those links here. Now, in terms of podcasts, and like I said, I think this is a really good way to do those kind of like life hacks where you can save time, especially if you've got a busy work life and family and you're still, you're trying to move things forward. First of all, you're doing really amazing by being on this, listening to this presentation that I've got. But you can even take that further by listening to some of the great ones that are out there. So 3 of my favorites are The Analytics Show by Jason Tan, and there's a link to that. I actually appear on that next Monday, so self-plug there, and talk about what we're doing at Decision Inc., my journey in terms of the analytics space. So that's a really interesting one. From overseas, we've got Analytics on Fire by Miko Yuk. She runs a company called BI Brains, and they've got a great podcast, so check that one out. There's always interesting things that I find when I listen to that one. She's got some great guests. Digital Analytics Power Hour is another one that is really interesting. It's more around the digital side, the marketing and other areas of a company that you might have and generate data from, and what can you do with that data. So they've had some great guests there as well. Now, if you're going to get started, and let's say that you download Power BI or ClickSense, etc., you'll need to, maybe you can figure it out. If you're a smart analyst, you've done some really interesting things with Excel. You might be like me, where you just want to go in, download it, play around with some data, break things. Or maybe you want to get started by watching some videos. So there's some ClickSense getting started videos. There's some good stuff with Power BI. These guys are Guy in a Cube. They are a very popular Power BI provider of information, and they've got a YouTube channel. So if you take a look at those, you can see the Guy in a Cube one here. They've got a whole heap of videos, not just around updates on what is going on with Power BI, but they've also got other kind of lessons that you can learn. And I've definitely watched these and very similar other shows and podcasts that I've listened to as well, and I've gained so much information. Power BI, I'm pretty much self-taught. It does help that I started off on Click and I knew a lot of that, but with Power BI, I just watched a whole heap of these videos. There's some training courses that you can do as well, and I'll show you those, but they were really cool. Centdex and many others, if you just type in Python programming or machine learning, etc. These guys here, well, this guy, Centdex, he provides a whole lot of intro videos. So let's say, for example, you go ahead and you get Anaconda, you go into this, you download that. you're trying to learn, well, what can you do with it? He's got a lot of good examples in terms of whether it's just learning the program and getting started, the intros, or even just getting intros into machine learning if you do go to that next level. If you're more finance focused, I think an interesting one is what the guys are doing at Quantopian. So it's a US firm where what they do is they give you a way to learn through different examples, just things that you can do with finance data, especially if you're interested in financial markets. So for example, if you click on one of these, I've run some different back tests there. You can learn how to do all of this, this Python coding, and they do a lot of research and learning, and there's different lectures that they run. So there's a lot of free information like that out there. Their goal is to get really good algorithms that they can actually run money off of. And if you do well in terms of your trades, they can even cut you in on some of that. So it's worth looking at. But even if your goal is just to learn how to use Python for finance, that could be something too. And then finally, Microsoft has a whole heap of Power BI courses that other people run. And so the great thing about YouTube videos is, hey, they're free, right? But in terms of getting access to data that you can play around with, that's up to you to look for. And I'll show you some of these at the end. But with these courses, sometimes these courses, they are, well, this one here is $199 if you want to pay for that, or $160 or $189. Sometimes they have sales, and I bought courses for as low as like $20 or $10, and it gives you, a couple of hours worth of video. And so it's really interesting, as well as providing you content and example Excel files and other kind of files that you can play around with. So in terms of some of the data where you can get stuff from, if you go to the ABS, you can see a whole heap of information that the ABS provides in terms of statistics. Okay, you can go to each of these indexes. They've just redone their website. They've actually made it a lot easier to find key bits of information. If we go back, let's take a look at price indexes. You can see things like consumer price index, wage price indexes, resi price indexes. So maybe your business, you're interested in seeing, what's going on in the housing market and how does that play a part in what you do? Well, you can go down here, you can see the data downloads. Maybe there's more information. You can either download this information here, but there are ways for some of these tools like Click and Power BI to directly connect to the website here. So as the ABS updates, you can just have your tables update and you can produce these types of charts. Whether it is something that you're just using for internal purposes or you want to share this with the world, that's certainly possible. Okay, so what I do in the presentation is share with you a whole heap of different interesting kind of data sets. So whether it is government with the Australian Bureau of Statistics, there's stuff from the Prudential Regulatory Authority, APRA. They have a whole heap of superannuation and early release super data. The RBA has a lot of stuff on interest rates and other interesting data sets, or it could be sentiment. So there are things like the ANZ Roy Morgan. Westpac does something similar, but ANZ Roy Morgan were something that I used in the past. I went to this site and I was getting information about consumer confidence for a bit of analysis that I was doing. SimilarWeb is a company where you can type in different websites and you can compare how traffic is flowing through to them. So you can take a look at data from them. If we go to housing, there's SQM Research, Louis Christopher, who runs SQM Research. They've got a lot of insights into the housing market, and you can pay for some of that information, or you can just use the chart that he's got on the website there. CoreLogic, they are the epitome of housing market data, and some of that information, you can read the tables that they've got there. You can read the research. There's some good insights there. If you're a financial kind of person like me, it's either ASX or Chi-X to get some information, or you can go to Yahoo Finance or even Google Finance. And if you do some stuff with Google Finance, you can go to Google Finance. You can go to Google Sheets, and there are ways that you can get market information to refresh and update within Google Sheets. So this is a link and an example of how to do that. So finishing it off, basically, Decision Inc., we are a Aussie company, but we are global. Okay, so head office is in South Africa. We've got quite a large footprint across the world. We've got a whole team of experts that are willing, ready, capable of doing all of these things that I showed you just here. This is really just scratching the surface. There's so much that you can do with data, whether you're a small business or large. Like I said, it doesn't have to cost you that much to get started. There's so much that is there in terms of information, not just from what you produce and how to get that information out. So if it's Xero, MYOB, you've got things like Atani, there's other software out there that can do that, but even just from information that is out there in the wider world. And hopefully from these examples of things that you can learn from podcasts, YouTube videos, data sets that you can access, or even some of the tools, hopefully you get something out of this, okay? So if you want to see some more examples of the work that we've done here and overseas, you can take a look at this. And if you have any questions, then basically feel free to reach out to me, whether on LinkedIn or other places. Yeah, feel free. I am more than happy to answer the questions if it means moving the dial forward with all of this kind of stuff. I also run a data science association. So if you are interested in that, I'll leave that in the notes as well. But in the meantime, thank you very much. And I hope you have a wonderful day.